Hey, Jim Duncan, Nest Realty, 434-242-7140. Sitting here with Greg Slater, Nest Realty.
434-981-6655.
He always gives out our numbers because he says we like to talk to people. I'm not sure that we do. But,
I even answer the sales calls.
I answer the spam calls just to see.
Not the insurance calls, though.
So it's first week of April, second week of April, 2025. We just entered the first quarter of 2025. In Charlottesville and Albemarle market, it's been, I've been saying for 20 some odd years, interesting. This has been a bit more interesting than we would have liked, I think, this year. A client asked me the other day, said, what are you seeing? And, are you seeing a shift in the market? And I said, yeah, I think I am. I did some quick numbers, and I don't think, and I'll tell you in 15 or 18 months if I'm right or wrong, and Greg will probably tell me in 20 minutes. But I think that we're seeing a shift. I think we're seeing a shift in inventory is growing. I think we're seeing a shift in buyer sentiment for many reasons. Not least is the volatility from the national level and world economic aspects. But the data, I don't think, reflects the sentiment and the feeling that at least I'm seeing and my clients are seeing. Just a quick look at the market from 1/1/2024 to 4/8/2024 in the city and county. And I'll let Greg do the actual numbers, but I looked at the days on market. And last year, in that time frame, 372 homes in the city and the county went under contract in 7 days or less. And this year, 336 did. A few more contracts last year than this year, but I think the indication that I'm seeing is that things are still moving in the first weekend, first 10 days. But I think that some people have more luxury of time to have more thoughtful consideration as to whether they want that house. Still be prepared to pull the trigger as quickly as possible, pro or con. So again, I think we're seeing a shift where people have a bit more reason to pause sometimes, and I think we're seeing agents, I think in particular, are fighting to stay abreast of the market and understand exactly what's happening with the ebbs and flows of the daily market, really.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. Those stats, I think it leads us to the same place. I'm starting to use some different terminology, okay. Right? Shifting is okay. We've used that before, but the word I'm using most now is fracturing, right? Because I think different segments of the market have different challenges. There is still segments of the market that have a tremendous amount of pent-up demand where you can expect double-digit showings and multiple offers. And then there are segments of the market where demand is softening, and it's a much longer conversation than we can have in front of this camera to understand it at that level. But that's what I try to help my clients understand when they're selling, their expectations for the demand for their home, and when my buyers are shopping, how difficult it might be and why they might need to consider criteria they're not considering.
Right.
But the stats I look at that guide me are, it's nice to have a quarter break and look at a whole quarter of data and compare it year over year. But year over year in Albemarle County, we listed 13% more homes than we did last time. So we had an increase in resale listing activity. But when you look at contracts, we had a decline in contracts. Everybody thought lack of listings was holding back our market. Well, it's a little bit true. The contracts, though, being off 14%, you have to break down further. And when you do that, you see that resale contracts year over year were flat.
Right.
But new construction contracts year over year in Albemarle County were down 38%. So when you fly up higher and look at the whole area, you actually get a little bit of a different picture. And this is an important clue because this reminds me back to the period before the Great Recession in the mid-2000s when we talked about people needing to change their geography to get what they could afford. New construction sales in Fluvanna and Greene are what are holding up new construction sales for the whole area while we had a dip in Albemarle County.
And Louisa too.
And Louisa too, yeah. That's right. Spring Creek is still a bustling place that serves a lot of people retiring mostly, but it is for families too, for sure. But on the inventory side, just to give an understanding of where we're at, when we got to the first week of May last year, there were 138 homes on the market, resales in Albemarle County. 87 of them had survived 10 days on the market. This year, I know it's a startling number to think back, but this year, 138 goes to 202, and that number is higher today than it was when I pulled that number on the 7th. But that 87 with 10 days on the market is now 157 with 10 days on the market. So that is totally indicative of the shift you're talking about, but it's not as simple as that. You can't apply that to the entire market.
On that, so for my clients who watch this, who I've only spoken to on the phone, this is what I'm doing when I talk about market band. Whenever I find I'm talking to my clients, I have my headphones in, and I give the disclosure that I'm doing this, and they can't see me. But the overall market is one thing, but when we're talking to our clients about their band, it might be like that 5 to 700 is a different market than the 8 to 1.2. Is a different market from the 350 to 475. I wish we had a sub 300 from an affordability perspective, but such is life. So I think it's something that we look at these higher level numbers, 82 versus 132, 150 days on market. I think for those watching, I think when you do your analysis with your agent, look at your band, because what we're talking about from a new construction perspective, it gets fit into the numbers overall. But if you're looking at resales in the city of Charlottesville, north downtown, that's a vastly different market than resale. We don't have new construction in the city, but resale in
Flint Hill.
Yeah, is that in the city?
It is.
But it's it's different than the new construction in Flint Hill, or the resale on the Greenbrier neighborhood. So I think it's always critical, and I've said this for years, that look at your specific market band, and then you make that hopefully cogent, thoughtful decision as to whether you want to buy. But to your point about pricing on days on market, I'm shifting up the numbers so as not to disclose anything. But I had a listing one time, and we wanted to hit 500, and we ended up pricing the home right at 500. And hindsight, 2020, we should have started at 475, because the first weekend we had 27 showings, and we got one offer. And that one offer started at 450, and it escalated to 550. And I knew the agent pretty well, and we talked, and I knew what her response was. And she said, my clients were prepared to be irrational if they needed to be. They didn't need to be. And so we negotiated, and they came in at 450, we were at 500, we ended up at 480, 485. So what I'm getting at is, when you as a seller price your home, I think that maybe going a couple $1,000 under where you think that value is, not to say if it's worth 500 you start at 400 to get a bidding war, but you start maybe a touch lower. One, you might get multiple offers, who knows, but you're more likely to get that one offer that gets you through the closing, so you can move to the next chapter of your life. Because the value of being under contract in a week is immense when you consider the psychological value and the lost opportunity value of being on the market for 137 days.
The word psychological is what stands out to me in that, because that's what the conversation I have with my clients is about. The psychology of being a buyer right now is you want to get the best price you can get, and you have to weigh that against the risk of not getting the property, and being the first offer in or the third offer in, or how many offers are going to be, how well is the listing agent communicating, are they playing games, are they above board, is someone going to rush in and put in an offer with a short deadline, and how is the seller going to respond to that? And so it's impossible to pinpoint value with comps. We can only put ranges on it with comps. It's more difficult than ever when you come off of this many years of this level of activity, because there are just less comps. Right. And you can be looking at no clear sign of what a price point could be from the comps at the time you have to make a decision to list your house. And that's when you have to change the conversation to, where do we think the buyers are? Mm-hmm. I try not to use the fishing analogies, but it's really a fishing analogy. Are there any fish under the boat right now? Right. And what bait is going to attract the most of them? And because you're most likely going to get an offer if there's a hint of multiple offers occurring with an escalation, but if you price it in a manner that 10 people see it, only one makes an offer, you probably left money on the table, mm-hmm. right? And ultimately, taking an approach that is a price you would happily accept for your home that's lower than you think you would get if pushing the market usually works better than reaching to the higher end of the range we can justify.
And it's also psychologically as well. Again, a lot of what we do is psychological human analysis, which is not anything I was ever trained for other than through practice. But it's something that understanding that if you price it at 500, you get an offer at 500,
Well, let me ask you the most common question I get when I'm helping someone buy a home and we know there's going to be more than one offer. What should the upper limit of my escalation clause be, Jim?
The one that you're comfortable winning or losing.
Yeah. I say it differently. It's the one that you're high-fiving if we get it, and you're not upset that you didn't get it. I said, what's the most you're willing to pay for this home and not be upset you didn't get it? That's the way I put it. And it's a hard question to ask, and it's a harder question to answer. I'm like, usually, and this is the time we're preparing the contract, and at that point I'll say, you know what, they've given us 24 more hours to get these in. Take the next 24 hours and ruminate on this, and then come back to me and tell you your number, and we'll talk about the pros and cons of different numbers. The psychology of it all gets ramped up. I often help my clients understand you may be competing with someone that has already put in 5 offers, right? Or more offers than you and lost. And that's when the changes and you get fatigued and you start doing things a little more irrational, and there's a lot of irrationality in the market still right now, without question. There are people who are willing to pay more than what we can prove a home is worth. And in that case, it becomes hard to choose your offer as a seller in a multiple offer situation, because I was in a multiple offer situation this weekend that were 5 cash offers, and every one of them had to be cash to get it for what they were offering, because otherwise there's no chance it appraises.
Right. So, question for you. As we're moving through this market, we've both got experience of doing what we do. How are you preparing for a market where we're counseling our sellers that we're looking at potentially weeks on the market and not days on the market?
Well, I talked first of all about their motivation level, right? And what their personal situation is. Why are they selling, right? The buyers always want to know while we're even looking at a house, why are they selling? I don't know. I mean, if we get to the point we're going to make an offer, we'll find out, but we really don't care because they may not tell us the truth.
Right.
And at the end of the day, it matters less than a buyer thinks it does. But as a seller, it matters a lot, because if you're prepared, if you're more interested in getting as much as you can get for the house, then getting a reasonable price for it, and you don't really need to sell, what is that strategy?
Right.
Versus someone who has taken a job and they know they're going to be gone in 30 days is a different strategy, and you have to weigh those things effectively. But I tend to tell people, if we price this home for what a reasonable buyer, as knowledgeable as they are now, and a reasonable agent thinks it's priced fairly, you will do better than someone that walks through the house and goes, yeah, they're reaching a little bit here. And maybe because you're trying to have someone walk through the house and be like, okay, if we want this house, we need to decide quickly, versus, this one may be on the market next week and something else may be coming on better this time of year, right? And so you're trying to thread that needle. I do talk about the market change, and I do talk about softening demand, and particularly in some segments of the market. You can expect that you might not have multiple offers in the first weekend or even 5 showings. And those are different conversations, and pricing those accordingly. But at the end of the day, when the market's changing and you can feel it changing, you have to figure out how to get in front of it and not be behind it. Because being behind the market when you list your home at a price, it's ultimately going to cost you a little bit, mostly, unless you get lucky.
Financially and psychologically.
Yeah. Sometimes a price that is, and sellers, you've experienced this. Some sellers will trade a little bit of market value or a return on their investment for all the other terms that are exactly what they want, so they don't have to move twice, get to stay in their home for a few weeks, and that's the other thing too. And
there's confidence. I mean, I think that a lot of what we're looking to provide to our clients is, confidence that they can do life, frankly. They took the job, now they can move. Or the spouse has to stay behind only for 2 weeks instead of 12 weeks. I think that a lot of what we do is, yes, it's obviously financial, it's real estate, et cetera, but it's also life and sharing life experiences. I think that one thing I was sort of talking to a younger agent recently, and I did give you credit, grudgingly and honestly, that one thing you said years ago is that when you priced a home, this is a different market, but still the advice remains the same. When you price a home, you at the time I think you said under 30 days, and I think that now I'm sort of coaching my sellers, try to price it if you can to be under contract in 3 weeks or less, because once that buyer gets to tell everybody the same thing, once the buyer gets the ding on their phone from Zillow or Realtor.com or whatever, you want that buyer to see your house and say, okay, I need to go see it right now. Because after that 2 weekends of buyers seeing the house, you've exhausted the current buyer pool. And then you're waiting on life.
Fish under the boat.
Yep.
Pin up demand.
Yep.
Buyers on the sideline who want what you want. When that happens, you're waiting for the next fish to swim by.
You're waiting for a job transfer or pregnancy, divorce, life, whatever. So again, I think when helping my clients, buyers or sellers decide, you look at the data, you attribute it to your own risk threshold and what you're able to afford or want to afford, and then you try to make the best decision you possibly can with the best, most relevant information available to you.
What do you think the hottest segment of the most competitive segment? If you only pick one price range and one geographic location, what is the hottest segment of the market? And this is relatively subjective. I'll answer it too.
Yeah.
But you go ahead. I want to hear what you say.
I think there's three. I mean, I think there are three.
I for one, Jim.
I know.
Start with A, and I'll let you tell B and C later.
It's hard. I think that for me, through my lens, I'm seeing that the sort of the most competitive market segment is Crozet and Forest Lakes 20 on North. The 500 to 750 price point, 3-4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, because it's a product that a lot of people want. And the 2B is going to be the city of Charlottesville single family home.
So, is that the most difficult or the most competitive? Because I think it's the most difficult. Because half of those people, or 75% of the buyers who want that, aren't going to get it. They're going to buy a townhome.
Yeah.
Right? Or they're going to rent. I think the most competitive segment of the market is 1 to 2 million with a view and more than a half an acre.
Okay,
I don't care where it is.
Is that recency bias?
Is that what?
Recency bias. Is that because of your most recent transactional lens, or is that just...
No, I think it's been going on for a while, and I think it's gone up. And it used to be right around stuff in the 9s going for 1.2 or 1.3. Now it's stuff in the 1.2 or 1.3 going for 1.5 or more, and then it's stuff from 1.7 to 1.8 going for over 2 million. Mm-hmm. And the hottest segment of the market, I think, is caused by people who have 20, 30, or 40 years of equity in home ownership that are now buying their last home, and they're buying what they want with cash, and they don't care what the value of it is. It is recency. I'm seeing more of it right now, but I think it's real.
I think it's real. I think it's also a lot of... I had a buyer, too, within the last 3 years where they're making, in my professional opinion, an irrational, emotional decision to pay 1.5 for a 1.1 house or whatever it was. And part of the counseling process is you understand that from a resale perspective, this is going to be challenging. And I remember one of them looked at me dead in the eye and said, "I don't care. It's my kid's problem."
Yes, this is real, right? They're spending the money they see as they're passing down to the next generation anyway. Yep. And they want what they want at that stage of life. And I respect that, and I help people achieve that when they hire me to get what they want and devise strategies in a multiple offer situation to get what they want. So now, what is the most softening segment of the market, or that market where you're less likely to predict a sale in the first weekend?
Rural. I mean, I think the plus 3 acres, because I think that plus 3 acres is going to take you a little bit further out of the city, the urban ring of the county. You're going to be broad brush 25 to 32 minutes away from stuff. Which is something that a lot of, at least through my lens, a lot of my clients, they want to have proximity to stuff under 22 minutes, give or take.
Okay, I agree with that, but I don't know that that's indicative of the shifting market we're in. I think that's kind of always the case. Mm-hmm. What about in the urban ring? What's this, or in these more? Yes. What in the most popular geographic areas, in the types of neighborhoods and things we want? What is? Do you think the
more soft market?
Yeah, where you might not predict that there are going to be a lot of, it may just be depending on what your seller wants to sell it for. I realize people are overpricing things right now, and in many cases, I think agents are not even realizing they're overpricing these things right now. They just don't understand how the market has changed.
I think practice matters. I mean, doing this all the time matters to know what the temperature is of the market. I would say resale townhomes that are competing against new construction.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. Good answer. I'll take it a step further. It's actually, for me, the villa. Right?
Yep.
What we did for 10 years leading up to the Great Recession is beg builders for more product and affordably with a first floor owner suite. And we have it now. Think about every community that comes on the market. Segment of townhomes, segment of villas, and as many single family detached homes as they can get. The single family new construction detached is just in a price point now that the homes aren't enough home for the people that can afford them.
Right.
But I had a conversation with one of the major builders in the area literally yesterday, and he described the villa market as softening so much for them, where they have plenty to build, as if maybe we need to remove the word villa and call them something else, right? Because there's a resale inventory of those things now because we've been building them for a decade, and they're on the docket for every community going forward. Hundreds of them.
I remember advocating 15 years ago for builders to build that villa product.
Yeah, no, we got
And
there.
now we got them.
We got there and we have enough. Townhomes are more seasonal to me. I'd say right now it's difficult to overprice a townhome, but you can if you don't understand your new construction competition. If you understand the market, you should be able to sell your townhome in March, April, or May in Albemarle County in the urban ring in the first weekend, period. There are enough buyers for that, but not everybody does. Because some people want to reach a little bit or they don't understand the market. But by the time you get to the fall, they're softening every year in the townhome market. Spring is the peak, fall is softening, and it goes up and down and up and down. Yeah.
What would you say is, if you're sitting in front of a buyer or seller right now in early April 2025, what's one piece of advice you'd want to give them?
I mean, look, you have to take the time and understand the market in the context of your situation. That's the advice. And you need to find somebody to talk to about it so you fully understand what your options are, because there are so many outside influences on people right now in the world we live in that it is, for buyers, confidence is creeping in. I mean, I don't know what today's date is, but yesterday mortgage interest rates went up by almost a half a point. Because of the silliness of what's going on with the manipulation of the stock market and the bond market. I mean,
Right.
They went to 695. And so, start a conversation as early as possible with someone you trust and have that conversation until you make the decision you want if you're contemplating selling. Obviously, if it's time to get your home on the market and go, you got to get your home on the market and go. But otherwise, get informed so you can make a decision that works best for you.
Echoing that, I mean, for a buyer or seller, interview the agent to find one that you trust, that you have a good relationship with, that you're a good fit for each other. As we've talked about many, many times, not every agent is going to be the right fit for that buyer or seller. So that's one. And two is going to be for the clients out there who are looking at pricing their home to buy, to sell, or looking to make an offer. Look at the data and ask the agent to show you the data that's important and relevant to you. I had one recently that it was a seller, and I was competing for the listing, and I showed my work. I showed how I got there with my data analysis, my flow of how I got to the distilled down to the market band, and I showed my work with links and photos and all graphics and all this stuff. And they said, one of the reasons that they chose me was we got along, they trusted me, and I showed my work. And they said that they sent me the part of the other agent, one of the other agent's analyses, and it was literally a printout, one-page printout from an MLS with pencil markings going through, which is part of my.
I'm not surprised.
No, it's part of my work product that I show sometimes of how I got there. But putting that information into a professional way to present that information so that they're able to grasp it and contextualize it for their decision-making process, I think is critical. I mean, it's something that has grown on me over the years, is how you present that information. Instead of just saying, here's my range. Yes, they trust me, but they also want to see how I got there. So I think the takeaway would be, talk to the agent, find a fit, and make sure that you two are on the same wavelength as far as how the information is presented and how they're going to understand and grasp it.
There are a lot of quality real estate professionals in our market. We're lucky to be here in the area, and I spent a lot of time doing stuff at the industry level in the association to build those relationships. So a lot of my clients are in a multiple offer situation, don't trust the listing agent or the seller, because they're like, what can they do? I'm like, it's the seller's house. They can do whatever they want with it. Yeah. 5 offers can come in. They can reject them all and raise the price if they want. I mean, there are no rules. But using the relationships I have with the other agent, that we can talk to each other directly, and they can tell me. The latest example was I was in a 5 offer situation. Someone put in the offer that tried to rush everybody before the others got in. The agent told me we got an offer with a 5 p.m. deadline today. I'm letting you know they can change that or they cannot buy the house. We are not going to look at offers at 5 o'clock. We respect what you're trying to do, and we respect what your client is trying to do, and we are going to stick to the terms we laid out. And that was refreshing, and it gave my client a whole different perspective of approaching the purchase of that home. And the agent told me later they looked at that offer that tried to rush them in a different light because of it.
I've had that. I mean, many times, and it depends. Every situation is different, obviously, but I think it's a matter of how it's presented, the relationships that exist, and making sure that everybody is. Again, at the end of the day, I'd like to think that most of the good agents are good people too and good professionals, and we're all just trying to do the right thing for our clients. Yes, we have somewhat opposing clients, but ultimately, if a buyer wants to buy a house and a seller wants to sell, one of our roles is to help them align their goals and their interests so that the buyer can move into the house and the seller can go into the next phase of their life and both be kind of happy about about the outcome. So
it's always rewarding to help all the parties involved in running a real estate transaction get to a successful ending.
I'm Jim Duncan with Nest Realty, 434-242-7140, jim@nestrealty.com. If you have questions, give one of us a call. We're happy to talk, because that's what we do.
Yeah, and I'm Greg Slater, Nest Realty, 434-981-6655, gregslater@nestrealty.com.